Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at the investment markets. Less than a week to go now before the US election, and it's really getting quite interesting in the US now. You've got 36 states now with rising cases of COVID. Some hospitals are getting very close to capacity now and sort of running out of beds. Now that's obviously playing against the backdrop with an administration, and obviously President Trump is, continuing to say that, we're rounding the corner, the US is getting on top of the situation, whereas obviously his medical experts, obviously led by Dr. Fauci, is really saying that that's not the case. Also quite interesting as well is President Trump's chief of staff has come out and said that they won't get on top of the pandemic, and it's really just a question of trying to manage it as best they can. Now, obviously, this is in direct contrast to what the president's saying, and so it's just going to be very interesting to see how this sort of plays out in the with the voters on November the 3rd. Because certainly on the back of those rising cases, the US stock market is taking a little bit of a hit. It's down around sort of 500-600 points, and it's just going to be interesting to see how it does sort of play through. Because certainly once you get the election out of the way, whichever party wins, there will be a stimulus package going forward. Obviously, if the Democrats get in, then that stimulus package is likely to be larger. And if that is the case, then that should give a further boost to the US economy. We've also got the Fed out there sort of, really stating that it will do everything it can. And it's just going to be interesting to say over the next sort of 2 to 3 months to see how this sort of plays through. Because certainly third quarter earnings haven't been too bad. If anything, they've been much sort of better than anticipated, certainly in a lot of sectors. Now, also as well, there is a little bit of good news on the vaccine front as well. AstraZeneca have come out and said that their sort of vaccine is showing immune antibodies coming through, especially in adult patients. But given the but given the sheer scale of the virus, even if a vaccine was approved tomorrow, it will still take quite a while to get it sort of rolled out and distributed. Oil is still trading around that sort of $40. And I say it's just going to be interesting to see how it sort of trades in the northern hemisphere winter, especially with potentially increased demand going through. That second wave also hitting Europe and certainly the UK pretty hard as well. And I say it's just going to be interesting to see how this sort of does play through in that northern hemisphere winter. Potentially it's going to be a pretty tough winter up there, and a very hard Christmas as well. Because certainly the evidence appears to be that sort of countries that do acknowledge the virus and go into that sort of lockdown, shutdown, even whether it's partial or a total, do seem to come out of it much quicker and much better. The UK's got the added complications as well as sort of Brexit as well. That's sort of rumbling along, and really the Conservative government at present look to be a little bit sort of all at sea. So they've got the issues with COVID, and they've still got Brexit as well. And at present, certainly the leaders appear to be looking a little bit lost. Closer to home in Australia, Melbourne is sort of easing its restrictions out there. People seem to forget they've been in lockdown now for 3 months. That is a very long time, and certainly, the sort of population of Melbourne is rejoicing and really sort of welcoming the relaxation of the restrictions. And really couldn't come at a better time with a week away now, the Melbourne Cup, the big horse race in Australia, and that will really be a sort of, I suppose, a celebration, really, if you like, for sort of Melbourne easing those restrictions and being able to get out and sort of partially get back to a more sort of normal way of life. Obviously as well, that gives the Australian economy a big boost as well, with sort of Melbourne coming out now. You've got hospitality opening up, and that's a further sort of boost to the Australian economy. Now here in New Zealand, we've got an economy that again is sort of pushing along at a reasonable rate. So the confidence appears to be sort of picking up out there. That's obviously helped by a sort of buoyant housing market, which again has really been driven by sort of New Zealanders coming home from overseas, due to the COVID virus, but also as well sort of record low interest rates and mortgage rates. So, back in April, May time, some economists and analysts were forecasting maybe a sort of 15-20% drop in house prices. That just hasn't happened. If anything, house prices are higher now than they were in April. So certainly that feel-good factor is sort of filtering through into the economy. And so you've seen a pickup there in consumer confidence and also investor confidence as well. Now, obviously, with restrictions being eased a little bit on Australia, that is sort of increasing the possibility of that sort of trans-Tasman bubble. It's already working one way with New Zealanders going to Australia without having to quarantine in certain states, but potentially now, in maybe sort of 6 to 8 weeks, we might see it sort of coming the other way as well, with Australians allowed to come into New Zealand without having to quarantine. If you get that and potentially the sort of Pacific Island as well, again, that will sort of increase the confidence out there in the New Zealand economy, but also as well give a pretty big boost to the New Zealand economy as well. As yet, still unclear after the election, when with Labor's comfortable victory, whether they will have a sort of a coalition government, if you like, with the Greens. There have been discussions this week. But it's really going to be quite interesting because Labour don't need the Greens in terms of majorities in Parliament. So given the record low interest rates, it is pretty tough out there for investors looking for income. There are alternatives, and if you're interested in discussing what is available, call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.